Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, November 11th, 2025 edition of the SANS Internet Storm Center's Stormcast. My name is Johannes Ulrich, recording today from Jacksonville, Florida. And this episode is brought to you by the SANS.edu Master's Degree Program in Information Security Engineering. Today's diary is about an odd username that I spotted in our honeypot logs. The username is FTP_3CX. And now, the 3CX part likely refers to the maker of business phone systems 3CX. A couple of years ago, they sort of went through the news for being the victim of a big supply chain attack. But what we are seeing here is likely unrelated. I did, of course, do a quick search trying to figure out, is this some kind of default username, maybe going with a default password? Doesn't look like it. And actually, 3CX, their product, does not really come with an FTP server. And our honeypot actually is looking for Telnet and SSH credentials. So we're actually not emulating FTP. I believe what's happening here is that if you're using these business phone systems from 3CX, one of the options you have to create backups is FTP. And they're talking the documentation about setting up an FTP server that will receive these backups. So again, the product itself doesn't come with an FTP server. It's something that you're setting up separately, and they're offering a couple popular sort of FTP server options here and walking you through how to set them up correctly. But there are a couple issues here. First of all, that the username, people are likely going to use a username related to the product. There is a comment here to the diary by Stephen who says, well, it's just human nature to use names like Stephen is using, for example, Veeam, like Veeam user, Veeam backup and such. If you're using Veeam here for 3CX, why not using FTP_3CX? The documentation actually uses a 3CX FTP user. So that's a variation of that particular user name. Similar, the passwords that we are seeing being attempted for this user are also sort of 3CX related, likely preying on users that are essentially a little bit lazy in picking strong passwords. So this is not a case where a vendor would pick this weak password for you. This is users making that mistake. A very plausible explanation here that this is just human nature. What's a little bit bothering me or interesting to me is how do attackers pick those particular names? And I suspect that maybe they found usernames and passwords like this in other breaches that they came across and figured, hey, we breached a couple of small business networks and such that ran the small business voice over IP system, and they all use the same usernames and passwords. Let's see, who else does that. That's, I think, sort of where some of this may be coming from. Be careful with your username and passwords. Pick at least a random password. And actually, for a case like this, no user will actually ever really type these in. These are stored in some configuration files. Not that wrong, really, to just use a random username as well here. And also make sure that, yes, FTP, not a great protocol, but if you're using FTP for backups, that this user then does not have access via SSH and Telnet. So that way, if someone spots that password on the network, they're not able to actually log in and get a shell easily with that password. And we've got an interesting issue here around default usernames and passwords with Watchguard Firebox devices. Now, the issue here is a default password for SSH. SSH is listening on port 4118, so not on port 22. And the default credentials are admin as username and password read-write. This was apparently assigned a CVE number 2025-59396. However, Watchguard does actually mention this configuration in their manual and suggests administrators to change it. Don't know, I like that. Don't know if I think this should be assigned a CVE number. NVD apparently doesn't think this is supposed to receive a CVE number because they ultimately rejected this particular CVE. interesting controversy around this, but in my opinion, there shouldn't be a default password select. Apparently, newer versions of Watchguard Firebox firewalls do not contain or use this particular default set of credentials. So there is a patch for a vulnerability that never existed in some ways. But yes, definitely, if you're running Watchguard, be aware of this issue and double check that your administrators changed this password or at least disabled access to the account. And then we got an interesting vulnerable JavaScript library for a change, not an obviously malicious one. This is expr-eval. Expr-eval is intended to be used to evaluate math expressions. Now, you could use the JavaScript eval function, but everybody knows eval is just one letter away from evil and is a function that should be avoided at all costs in any language, not just JavaScript, because if you are executing strings, there's always a chance that some malicious command slips through. Well, that's what expr-eval is trying to avoid. They're trying to constrain the eval function to just mathematical operations, where this is sometimes quite useful, but apparently, well, they didn't get it quite right, and this update now is fixing an issue where someone could slip through some commands. So definitely keep it updated, and if you're doing NPM will help you actually figure out if you're running this particular library. So an NPM audit should be able to detect the vulnerability and then also offer the ability to patch it. Well, and this is it for today. So thanks for listening. Thanks for liking and subscribing to this podcast. As always, special thanks for leaving any good comments with your favorite podcast platform. Then that's it for today, and talk to you again tomorrow. Bye.